It is 1885. You've been shopping in town all day, and there is nowhere to have a wee. Compared to other cities, London was really slow to build public loos. Usually you had to go into a pub or a cafe or a hotel and buy something in order to use their loos. And so a lot of people simply improvised outside instead. To this day, London is covered with old signs saying, "Commit no nuisance." They're not talking about listening to TikToks with no headphones on. This actually goes for women as well as men. You probably wouldn't be wearing any knickers until the end of the century, so if you were desperate, you could just hike your skirts up. But a bloke can have a wee outside and keep his place in society, whereas a lady who's caught doing that has forfeited her right to be called respectable. London used to have public toilets. In the 15th century, Lord Mayor of London, Dick Whittington, yes, the guy from the Pantos, I'm thrilled to tell you that he's real, left money in his will to build a massive 128-seater toilet over the Thames. And then in 1851, there was a huge expo in London called the Great Exhibition, which I've talked about in a video before. The people who ran the exhibition knew there'd be people coming from all over the world, and it was going to be so embarrassing if they all have to pee in the street. We can't let the French know how we live. One letter to the Times said, "London is the worst provided city in Europe with such temporary conveniences. If something is not done at once, before the crowds of foreign visitors arrive, scenes of a gross character will be incessantly occurring. Our wives and daughters will be unable to venture out of doors, and the police will be fully occupied with the most absurd, though disgusting office of keeping foreigners in order, while the doors, porticos and railings of our squares and public buildings will become receptacles of impurity." Some may doubt this. I have resided too many years in various parts of the continent to believe otherwise. So, a guy called George Jennings was given the job of building loos for the exhibition. Now, he didn't do this out of the goodness of his heart. It was a money-making scheme. He was trying to turn a profit. The urinals were free, because the goal is to stop people peeing in the street, but the stalls cost a penny. That price turned out to be really sticky in people's minds. In the same way that Freddo bars being 10p is really sticky, public loos were a penny for decades after that, despite inflation. So much so that my grandma still called going to the loo spending a penny in the 21st century, decades after the massive Victorian pennies themselves had gone out of circulation. Anyway, Jennings' loos weren't technically the first loos open to the public in London, even in the 19th century, but they were a big, visible financial success, earning him over £2,000 over the course of the exhibition. So he became the go-to loo guy for the rest of his life. He said, "The civilization of a people can be measured by the perfections of their domestic and sanitary appliances. And I am convinced that the day will come when public lavatories, replete with every convenience, will be constructed below the pavement level not only in large towns, but in every locality where large numbers assemble. And the engineer who has the courage to carry into effect a scheme of this kind in the interests of public health will have established a lasting record of the wisdom of the age." In 1855, he built the world's first underground public loo at Bank Junction, and underground Victorian loos are still a massive fixture of Britain's urban landscape today. But here's a strange thing. it was men's only. Now, I know why Jennings didn't build a ladies'. Hardly any women had used the ladies at the Great Exhibition. Almost all that money he'd made had come from the gents. And we don't know why that was for certain, but we can posit a few possibilities. First off, if the urinals are free and the stalls cost a penny, then men only have to pay sometimes, whereas women have to pay every time. And a penny was actually quite a lot of money back then. For example, in the year of the Great Exhibition, the journalist Henry Mayhew interviews a fruit-selling girl in London who says she earns about 1.6 a week on a 13-hour workday. So that toilet visit would be 40 minutes pay for her. If you're on the London living wage today, 40 minutes of your pay is over £9. Would you use a toilet that cost £9 a go? So it costs a lot of money to use the loo if you're poor, and women just don't have as much money as men. So poor women probably aren't going to be using your toilets. But rich ladies aren't going to be using them either, because there's a massive social stigma in the Victorian period against proper ladies even being seen going into a toilet. If you're going into a toilet, then you poop. And ladies do not poop. Trying to read about toilets in this period is really hard because they simply cannot say it. Poo! Toilets! Wee! Scatology! They have to talk so far around it that sometimes it's hard to tell what they're talking about. Even the men call toilets provision, necessaries, resting places, sanitary arrangements, or accommodation. So imagine being a fancy Victorian lady and trying to announce to your group of friends, wait a minute, I need the toilet. You can't say that. So I can understand why, for George Jennings, he didn't want to build ladies' loos. He's not there to make something useful for society, he's there to make money. And ladies' loos weren't making him any money. The problem is that because he's the go-to loo guy, everyone else copies how he does it. By the 1880s and 1890s, there were quite a lot of public loos for men, and there were hardly any for women. In her autobiography, A London Child of the 70s, she means the 1870s, Mary Vivian Thomas recalls that a morning's shopping was all we could manage for one day. For, strange as it seems now, the big shops had no restaurants, no restrooms, no conveniences for toilet, however dire one's need. By 1893, the City of London had 10 public loos, and only one had a ladies', which had only opened that year, and it was smaller than the gents section. This is the plan for that loo in Holborn, and you can see the ladies has 6 stalls, whereas the gents has 8 stalls and 12 urinals. Here's another one for St Martin's, and you can see they've deliberately designed the gents to be bigger. Now, if there aren't any public loos nearby, men might be able to nip into a pub, a coffee house, or a club to use their loos, but those places are all men only. If you're a woman, you're out of luck. Even restaurants were iffy. A brochure in 1900 said that until recently, there was not a single restaurant in all London where a man could take his wife or daughter. And if you're thinking, well, if they were desperate, why didn't they just suck it up and go in the pub anyway? I can only point you towards the massive queues for the ladies today. I've waited 15 minutes for the ladies rather than go in the men's, and every woman I know has too. The Barbican has a pair of toilets that they've converted to gender neutral with urinals and gender neutral with stalls, and I still queued for what was formerly the ladies rather than go in what was a gents with the name filed off. I mean, part of the reason was the smell. I don't know how you guys stand it, but also the social pressure. That place isn't for me. I'm not allowed in there. And it's not only public loos. Your workplace might not have toilets. By law, they didn't have to. In 1889, the British Weekly Journal described a large printers near Fleet Street where women worked from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. with no sanitary arrangements. What that means is you can't go too far from your house and you can't stay out too long because sooner or later you'll need to go home just to have a wee. Scholars sometimes call this phenomenon the urinary leash or the loo leash. I'm not calling it that, but if you want to Google it, that's a term that's helpful to know. It means you are bound to your home. There might be whole areas of the city that you can't go to because there won't be a toilet within walking distance, making those areas effectively men only. And it's not the subject of this video, but it bears saying if trans people can't go to an area because there isn't a loo they can use without getting yelled at or worse, then that area is effectively cis only. If people with kids can't go to an area because there's no baby changing within walking distance, that area is adults only. If disabled people can't go to an area because there's no accessible loo, that area is able-bodied only. The autobiographer Edith Hall recounts her mother telling her about Victorian times either ladies didn't go out or ladies didn't go. And this suited a lot of Victorians just fine, because there was a belief that men and women occupied what have come to be known as separate spheres. Basically, men should control public life, and not just public spaces, but also politics, the economy, the workplace, and so on. And women should occupy the private sphere, their house. If women couldn't go out in public much because they couldn't go to the loo, that's fine. Home is where they're supposed to be. But not everyone thought this way. There were, honest to God, feminist organisations that campaigned for councils to build more ladies' loos, like the Ladies' Sanitary Association, the Promotion of the Employment of Women, and a magazine called The Woman's Gazette, which said in 1879 that it would seem natural that an age which supplies the needs of dumb animals for rest and refreshment, which provides drinking troughs for cattle, should make some provision for the needs of the thousands of women who pass and repass from one end of the great metropolis to the other in pursuit of the daily lawful callings. In 1879, a doctor called James Stevenson wrote a report calling for councils to build ladies' loos as a matter of public health, noting that on this score, London was behind Paris, Glasgow, and most shamefully, Nottingham. Nottingham had one ladies' loo, and it was beating us. With one! He says that women shouldn't have to go to a cafe and buy something just to use the loos there. To obtain this much-needed accommodation, some ladies go to restaurants and order refreshments which they do not require, and others to milliners and confectioners' shops. Tell me about it, James. One of the reasons that local councils didn't want to install ladies' loos is because they thought they'd become hangouts for sex workers. It's hard to convey how much Victorians went on and on about this. If you were a woman, you could hardly sit on a bench without someone thinking you were soliciting. In the 1913 play Pygmalion and the musical based on it, My Fair Lady, the Edwardian flower girl Eliza Doolittle is constantly telling people, "I'm a good girl, I am," because the assumption was that if you were a grown woman selling flowers, then you were secretly a sex worker trying to pick up clients. In 1894, a temperance campaigner called Laura Ormiston Chant investigates a West End theatre for immorality, and she estimates the number of sex workers there by counting how many women aren't wearing gloves. And you didn't just have to worry about people silently judging you. The Met Police had a blanket rule that any woman on Regent Street after 10 p.m. was probably a sex worker. You could be arrested for this. So some people argued that actually the real supporters of women are the ones who don't want ladies' loos, because more ladies' loos will mean shoving sex work right in the faces of our wives and daughters. That's not very feminist of you. The Reverend J.R. Knowles said that ladies would be especially annoyed by ladies' loos, as they would have to pass by the objectionable place every time they went to the railway station. This apparently wasn't a problem with men's loos. This is partly a fear of sex work and also a fear of the lower classes. A proper lady shouldn't spend too much time around either. Although Dr. Stevenson was ahead of his time in calling for ladies' loos, He also thought that they should be segregated by class. He suggests that councils build a nice set that you pay for and basic free ones, partly because it is only reasonable that those who directly contribute to the cost and maintenance of public conveniences should have better accommodation, and partly because women of the middle class will not be willing to company, for however short a time, with a promiscuous crowd. He's using promiscuous here, not in its modern sense of having lots of sexual partners, but in an old-fashioned sense, meaning intermingled, mixed, unsegregated. But the modern sense did exist when he wrote this. He is overtly talking about working class women, but he could just as easily be talking about sex workers. In 1900, the British Medical Journal said that it would be nice to have a free ladies' loo in London, but women who are particular in these matters would know that the closet charged for was not used by people who, being unable to pay for the use of a convenience, are quite possibly habitually unable to pay for soap and hot water. These are deep-seated disgust responses, the kind that we evolved to keep us safe from disease and rot. I think that's why people got so angry about ladies' loos. In 1900, St Pancras wanted to build one at the junction of Parkway and Camden High Street, and first they put a temporary wooden hoarding in so they could see if it caused congestion. And people started ramming it with their carts on purpose. According to one vestryman, it was hit a whopping total of 45 times just because local bus drivers and cart drivers didn't like the ladies' loo. That ladies did get built, though, and is still on Camden High Street to this day. And that vestryman's name? George Bernard Shaw. I am dead serious. Strangely enough, it's not local councils who really lead the way on building ladies' loos, but local businesses. Shopkeepers start to realise that if women could stay out shopping all day, then it'd be better for their business. One letter in a trade journal for fabric shops said that sheer weariness, the necessity of rest, and the desire to arrange the toilet not infrequently shorten the visit. I feel certain the ladies would be pleased if, in each of these splendid establishments which adorn our large towns, there was a ladies' room, fitted with looking glasses and toilet appendages, and provided with neat and obliging female attendants. So, some of the earliest ladies' loos weren't public loos at all, but loos inside shops, like the fabric shop Seaman Little & Co. on Kensington High Street. Throughout the second half of the 19th century and into the beginning of the 20th, businesses start chasing lady customers' money. For wealthy ladies, fancy restaurants like the Criterion, the Trocadero, the Savoy, the Ritz and the Gaiety try to appeal specifically to female customers. Feminists like Jessie Boucherette and Emily Faithfull set up clubhouses for wealthy and educated ladies, not only to be able to use the loo and have a sit down, but to talk to each other, catch up on the news, and exchange ideas. If women can stay out longer because they don't have to worry about wetting themselves, then you're going to start seeing them in public spaces more often. After a while, it starts to feel more natural that women should be in public spaces, that this whole separate spheres thing just doesn't map onto the real world. You might not even notice that you have changed. This wasn't caused by a single lone activist or even a group of them fighting for this cause, but by millions of completely anonymous women just doing things ever so slightly differently to how their mothers did them, braving the public loos rather than holding it or going home early.
Thank you for watching. I have one more thing to say about this, and that is that originally this video had a whole second half about modern public loos and how they are closing faster than they're opening. I ended up having to cut it because otherwise this video would not have come out in a timely manner. But I did all the reading for it, So if you would like to find out about the state of modern public loos in London, I have all the sources in the description. You can also come and see me in person. I'm going to be speaking at the Norwich History Festival on the 19th of July. I guess normal YouTubers do convention panels and I do history festivals. I'm going to be talking about my book, Mavericks, Life Stories and Lessons of History's Most Extraordinary Misfits. Each chapter is about a different person in history who had a weird life. So if you would like to come and see me talk about that, there are tickets in the description as well. Thank you very much.
The auto cue has stopped and now I need to hoist my arse out of this bath. Oh, in a corset!